So here we are today to talk about developing character and how you come to understand the desires and goals of people whom you have created, for whom you create an entire life. And we are here to talk about this with the talented Maria Venegas, author of the wonderful memoir, Bulletproof Vest. One of the things I wanted to know, because it seems to me that you do this really beautifully, is how do you enter the point of view of characters other than yourself? What kind of exercises or what kind of orientation do you find yourself having to enter other characters?
Well, when I was working on my book, and one of the main characters is my father, who I didn't have a relationship with for 14 years, and I went back and reconnected with him after not speaking to him for 14 years, and so he started sharing these stories with me of his childhood, the way that he was brought up in rural Mexico. And so the stories that he shared with me really shed a lot of light on the way that he had raised us. And it really made me understand how he was wired. Mm-hmm. So when I started to write the book, initially it was, I was writing all first person from my perspective. And I felt like I was getting in the way of his story, because I kept trying to say, like, well, my father told me this, or my father told me that, or according to him. And then finally, when I tried writing in the third person from his perspective, I felt like something really clicked, because I was able to get out of the way and just let him tell his own story.
Do you suggest to people that they try more than one point of view when they're creating a character, sometimes in the first, sometimes in the third?
Well, yeah, in the course that I'm currently teaching, I definitely always encourage my students to try writing the same story from try writing it in first person and then try writing it in third person, just to see what happens. Because I tend to think of creative writing, it's sort of like architecture, or like building a house or a building. And if you come to it thinking, okay, I'm going to go in through the front door. And then I'm going to start designing from there. You're already limiting yourself if you're not at least thinking outside of the box and thinking, well, what if we start with the cottage and then work our way through the yard and make our way to the house from the back porch and enter it that way? It's just, I feel that if you enter the story with these different perspectives, you uncover details that you wouldn't have otherwise.
I feel this is one of the most useful metaphors I could offer to you, which is the idea of the house and all the different ways you could approach it. So it can be the porch, it can be the back porch, you can come in through the basement and blow up the kitchen floor. You can come in through the attic and drop down into the bedroom. You can swing out from the tree. It's important to give yourself permission to approach your characters and your story in as wide a range as possible until you found the one that really gets you inside the story where you want to be. I have another question for you, which is, to you, what makes memorable dialogue? There is always that difference between what people say in real life and what we put on the page, and what is it that we're looking for in dialogue that makes it not just conversation?
I think the most important thing with dialogue is what it reveals about the speaker. For example, like with my students now, a lot of the times they keep trying to describe a certain character and say she's a narcissist, or he's a jerk, or what have you, and then suddenly, 2 or 3 pages in, we hear that person say something. And then I'm like, bingo, there you go. That's all you need. Sometimes if you just let that character have one line, that really it can reveal so much about that person and who they are, and do a lot of the work for you. Like, I think a lot of the times as writers, we keep trying to flesh out a character, and it's a lot of telling. Which can become extremely boring and mundane. And yeah, if you just let that person say a certain line that reveals something about them, I think it's huge. It does so much work for you.
There's a great quote from Richard Blanco in one of the segments in which I've interviewed him, and he says the requirement of the writer is to show and show and show some more, and then you get to tell a little bit. I think the emphasis on the good, the bad, and the ugly is crucial, because what we're talking about here is observation and being as wide-eyed and attentive as possible, taking in all aspects of a character, even the ones you've made up, and then empathy, so that nobody is flat, nobody is a one-dimensional villain. People have depth, they can surprise us. You can have somebody who shows tenderness and somebody who shows cruelty, because you want your characters to be like real human beings, only even more interesting. The last question I have for you is, besides Joe Christmas, do you have another favorite character in literature? Somebody who either moved you when you first encountered that character, or when you encountered that character you thought, these are the kind of characters I'd like to write?
You know, what's interesting is that I didn't grow up reading. And I certainly, when I was a kid and even a teenager, never thought that I would grow up to be an author. But when I was a kid, though, my mother used to read us a lot of Bible stories. And they were, you know, of course, in a kid's imagination, like Noah's Ark, and everybody perished. And it was like these fantastical things, or the thought that, was it Jonah that was swallowed by the giant whale and lived inside this fish for, I don't know how, for days. It really, I think it really shaped my imagination, to think like, wow, how could that, it was the impossible, but yet because my mom was reading these Bible stories to us as if they were completely factual, you know, it was kind of like the sky was the limit with what you could imagine and think up. And then also when I was growing up, my father played a lot of Mexican ballads. And so within, you know, like in those ballads, there's these, they tell these stories of love and betrayal, and most of them are violent, and it ends with the hero dying. But I remember being a kid and laying in bed and listening to these songs, and I could just picture them being played out in this dusty town in Mexico, and I hadn't been back to Mexico in so long that it just felt like a distant relative that I was no longer related to.
Yes, because character and storytelling are everywhere. They are one of the first things we learn. And as a writer, you can use all of those early characters, whether it's fairy tales or Bible stories or songs, to enhance your storytelling and to enhance your ability to take in characters and then create them on the page. Thank you so much, Maria, for coming and joining us and sharing with us your thoughts on character and dialogue.
Thank you for having me.